Hi, everybody. Backyard Beekeepers. It's Father Bill here for our latest update on what's going on with our bees around here in coastal North Carolina. We had our first Monday beekeeper meeting last night, and we had a great group of people. We had 25, maybe 30 folks. Brought lots of cookies and candy, and we had coffee. And we talked about some important issues with us here locally. And so we're putting this out today for those who couldn't make it. Some of our usuals couldn't make it. This is a recap for them and also for any of you all who are subscribing. This is for you too. I started off as I normally do. I start off these meetings with a story and a story that illustrates just how smart bees are. I started off with a story about a fellow who wanted to buy a parrot. So he went to the pet store and he talked to the storekeeper. And the storekeeper said, I got three parrots for you to consider. And the fellow said, okay. And parrot number one, he said, parrot number one is $500. Now, this parrot is computer savvy. He can operate your basic Apple Macintosh systems and as well as your Android systems, Microsoft, you name it. He's very, very versatile. Okay. Parrot number two, they went down, looked at him, said, now parrot number two is $1,000. And parrot number two is not only computer literate, but he's your IT guy. He can fix anything. He can fix any computer. He can actually program them. He's your parrot. And then they went down to parrot number three, who's just sitting up there watching what's going on. And the fella says, "Well, how much is parrot number three?" And the storekeeper says, "This parrot is $2,000." $2,000, yeah. Well, what can he do? And the storekeeper says, "Well, to tell you the truth, I haven't seen him do anything. But the other two parrots, they call him boss." So, anyway, back to bees. Bees are smart, part two. Somewhere I've read a study, and I can't remember where. So a lot of times I write these down, and then I can't remember where I put it. It sounds like a Tom Seeley study up at Cornell, but it's a study on bees and their memory and their learning. And so basically, the researchers put a community feeder out about 25 yards away from the bee yard. And they sat down and they waited and they watched how long it took for the bees to find the feeder. And of course, we know that process. The scouts go out, they find it, they come back, they waggle dance. And lo and behold, it took about an hour. And then the bees showed up and started feeding. So the next day, they moved the feeder 25 yards further out. And they sat down and they started timing how long it took for the bees to find it. And this time, it didn't take quite as long, maybe 35, 40 minutes. But the bees found it and they started feeding. And so the next day, they moved the feeder out another 25 yards to see how long it would take the bees to find it. Well, didn't take the bees very long at all, 20, 30 minutes max, and they're out there feeding. So the next day, as they're in the process of moving the feeder that morning, 25 yards further, when they get there, lo and behold, there's already bees waiting for the feeder to show up. Now, I've seen that study. I've read that study somewhere in a book, and I can't remember where. So if you can remember, let me know. But again, not only do they memorize landmarks and how to get to these spots, but somehow they memorize the pattern that was going on. So, yes, bees are smart. So, a lot of times, the best thing we can do as beekeepers is remember that And when we start messing with our hives and moving things around, thinking we might need to do this or do that, I always ask myself, well, what do the bees want to do? What are the bees going to do? What is their normal thing to do? I keep in mind that bees, like all living creatures, have really two imperatives. I call them biological imperatives, and one is survival and one is reproduction. Survival, reproduction. Right now, here we are in the beginning of March, the March buildup. We're seeing all the good flowers coming out, the dandelions, the henbit. Our red maple trees are starting to blossom. We still have some leftover camellias. So this time of year, it's all about reproduction, the birds and the bees, as it were. And so our bees are gearing up. Our queens are laying more. We're starting to see drones, and it won't be long before we'll see swarms. So it's a reproductive time. We just finished the last few months where the bees are in their survival mode, where they were clustering, because we had some really, really unusually cold weather. We had snow, significant snow. We had ice storm. Just 2 days ago, the low was down to 20. I think it was 23 in my backyard. So anyway, so those are two biological imperatives. One of the imperatives in reproduction, and we'll touch on that in a minute, is swarming. And of course, we get excited around here since we are sustainable beekeepers. We really enjoy catching swarms and bringing them into our bee yard and putting them in hives and monitoring them and to see if they're going to work out, if they have the kind of traits we're looking for. These again, the swarms that we're catching, from the most part, from our location here, these swarms are more than likely feral wild bees. We live on the edge of the city. We got all these woods around us, the river, a lot of hollow trees, a lot of feral bees. So anyway, but let's move on to the next thing, which is nosema. I had one of the local beekeepers call last week, it was, and she was concerned that she had started seeing a lot of bee uh, defecation, I call it just good old fashioned bee poop, all over the outside of several of her hives. And there were several bees on top of her hives that had died, and she was concerned that it was nosema. Now, nosema, we were taught way back in bee school that it was Nosema apis. And the number one symptom of Nosema apis, of course, was dysentery. And they showed us these ugly pictures of beehives smeared with bee poop and, on and on about how terrible this was. Well, it turns out that the latest research and the teaching on nosema has changed dramatically. It's no longer nosema, it's called Veromorpha, because that organism comes from a different classification. And secondly, apis is pretty unusual now. What we're dealing with is Serrani, and Serrani has shows very little symptoms. It's not and doesn't show the dysentery at all. And so it turns out that Serrani, if you were to try to treat it with fumagillin, which was what was prescribed for apis, it turns out a lot of the studies are showing that fumagillin can make matters worse. That's an antibiotic that interrupts the microbiome of the bee and kills off the good bacteria. So we've got uh, to really focus now more on the Serrani, the Veromorpha Serrani, Nosema Serrani. And the way we can tell about that, that's coming up pretty soon as we experience this spring buildup and as we see our colonies build up. Lo and behold, if we've got a colony that seems to be dragging along, exhibiting some weakness. Queen's not laying good patterns. We're not seeing a lot of bees building up. There may be the possibility that you've got Nosema ceranae. So, how do we know? Well, the best way to find out is we have to look for Nosema spores through a microscope, a 400 power microscope. So, my friend, the local beekeeper, she's a retired veterinarian and happens to have a microscope. So I said, listen, here's what you need to do. You need to get 25 of those bees, dead bees, and you need to uh, squash their abdomens, and need to make some slides. You need to look for spores. Uh, so it turns out that Randy Oliver has a 2-minute video presentation on how to do that. We were taught with our Cornell course that you need a whole lot more bees. You got to put them on a special sort of graph where you can count the number of bees in each square, and you do a formula. You end up with a threshold of about 1 million spores. Uh, but no, Randy's method is pretty simple. 2 minutes. You look in the microscope, you count the spores. Well, it turns out, to make a long story short, our beekeeper veterinarian didn't have any spores. So now we know that dysentery that she was seeing was not Nosema or Veromorpha. Rather, it was from something else. So she used her veterinary diagnostic methodology, which is called DAMIT. Each letter stands for a process of eliminating what could be a cause of this dysentery. And I think we came up with basically some of those bees had gotten into, because it was that time of year when our bees are starting to visit the dandelion and the henbit, and she's in a rural area where there's a lot of spraying going on. The what's called insecticides or pesticides, and a pesticide includes insecticides, herbicides, fungicides, and even miticides. So more than likely, what was killing her bees, the dysentery being the symptom, was something, a chemical or pesticide that some of the bees have gotten into. Because thankfully, a few days later, it resolved itself. The vast majority of her bees were doing okay. So basically, you're looking at the foragers, which are your older bees in the first place. They're not going to live much longer. In many cases, their probably immune systems were challenged at best, and then getting into something out there while they were foraging, it got to them. And but fortunately, that all got cleared up. So I think that was a fun learning for us as we talked about uh, the Veromorpha. Uh, let's see. Yeah, we got a little bit of time. We can talk about this too. We also talked about last night. We also talked about the uh, commercial losses that we've been hearing about, and we have a couple of our beekeepers work with commercial beekeepers here in our area, and I talked, and they were there, and we had a great chance to ask them. And lo and behold, the two commercial outfits they work for indeed had significant bee losses this year, and they attributed it to really poor management. Didn't feed them enough. Then we had the snow and ice. That's the weather. A whole bunch of different components coming together, but significant losses in the 60, 70 percentile. Um, and that was reported by Blake Shook, 2 or 3 weeks ago. Blake is a commercial beekeeper down in Texas, and I remember listening to his interview, and he shared that he managed about 30,000 bee colonies down there in Texas, and that he took a significant number of bees out to California for the almonds, and he's also a pollination broker. And so, lo and behold, as commercial beekeepers went out to get organized and get their bees ready to go to California, they were finding a lot of dead bees, a lot of colony loss. And then Project APIS got involved, started surveying, getting numbers, running numbers. The Bee Informed Partnership, I believe, they helped out. American Bee Federation, the National Honey Board, you name it. All these organizations have been really looking at this situation in a significant way. And many of the reactions that we've been hearing kind of harken back to 2006, 2007, the CCD, the last CCD, the colony collapse disorder, which occurred back then. The symptoms are very similar. Now, the symptoms are simply when you go into a hive, the majority of bees are gone. You will see some dead bees, but not many. You'll find food, you'll find honey, you'll find pollen. You'll even a lot of times find the queen with a small entourage with the queen. Uh, and Basically, this occurred, like I said, back in 2006 and 7. 2009, University of Maryland with Dennis Van Ingelsdorp put together a group of researchers, and they began to try to find the reason for this CCD event. And it turns out that their findings basically, there was not one specific cause for the event, but it was a combination of lots of different issues. And they were suspicious or suspecting that high virus loads and poor health contributed to that. Because as we know, bees exercise, exhibit this altruistic behavior, and when they get sick, they leave the colony and die away from the colony. So you've got this mass of sick bees that not all of them leave at the same time, but they over a period of several days they leave and they die. And now you've got basically a hive that's empty of bees, worker bees, forager bees, and very few dead bees in the hive. And of course, with with a the pesticide issue, we're used to seeing a lot of dead bees out front on the ground. That wasn't the case. So this time around, the dead bees were sent to the Beltsville, Maryland USDA lab, and Dr. Lamas is running that survey or research to see if indeed there's something else going on. And there's been some speculation that we may be dealing with a brand new virus with the bees. But we should wait and we should listen and see what the results are of Dr. Lamas's study. But down here on the coast, and since we are all backyard beekeepers, the good news is we have lost bees, but the normal amount of bees, which in our case is 40, maybe 50%. And so we're prepared for that. We cope with that. And I think our loss could have been high because we had a very dry fall. So bees were not bringing in their usual nectar. Like for example, goldenrod, and we had a very poor fall, and so we really had to feed. We had to feed like crazy. Then we had all of this cold weather, unusually cold winter, which meant our bees weren't able to get out and forage. So we had to feed inside, each beehive, which we did. And again, we used, in many cases, all of us either used candy boards or we used the Hive Alive fondant, which seemed to work very well. So anyway, so that's where we are in terms of that. And finally, I'm going to wrap this up because I don't want to go too much longer. Finally, we had a discussion the other day on what's better, lemongrass oil or Swarm Commander. Now, when I first started trying to catch swarms, I had read the abstract from Cornell highlighting Dr. Tom Seeley's research on catching wild bees, and the trap that they designed was a cube, 40 cubic liters of volume. And so me and another beekeeper, we said, well, let's try that. So we built 6 of these cubes and we put them out, and we put a Q-tip with lemongrass oil in them because somebody said, oh, that'll be a good lure. And we didn't do very well. I don't think I caught any bees, swarms that spring. I think my buddy Robert caught maybe one. So back to the drawing board, we discovered that through another beekeeper friend to use, oh, you got to use Swarm Commander, which we did the next spring. And lo and behold, we started catching swarms in these cubes, which was kind of neat. We call them Sealy cubes. Okay, so, and then we learned that you could take that cube and make it into a rectangle, still 40 cubic liters of volume, and we could put frames in. And lo and behold, we didn't have to hang them 15 feet up in the air. We could do it 5, 6 feet up. And lo and behold, we started catching more swarms in the Swarm Commander. So why is Swarm Commander? And they're not paying me or anybody to say this, but why is it better? Well, I went back and I decided let's look and see where's the science in it. And I found that right here in 1993, um, the American Bee Journal, a great magazine that I get, M.L. Winston and Associates, they conducted a study, and they discovered that along with lemongrass oil, synthetic QMP, which is 9-ODA particularly, uh, and citral and geraniol and nerolic acid, if you put that all together, you get a swarm lure that's a whole lot better than just lemongrass oil. Lemongrass oil, it mimics the pheromone that comes from the Nasonoff gland in the tail end of the honeybee, and that gland emits that pheromone, and I call it a homing beacon because other bees key in on that, and they can come to that location where that bee is emitting that pheromone. So lemongrass oil, yeah, that works. But what works best is this combination with the synthetic QMP, citral, geraniol, and nerolic acid. So this is in 93. I haven't researched when Swarm Commander was invented, put together. We don't know what the ingredients are other than we can smell the lemongrass oil because the ingredients are proprietary. And I did some Google Scholar, ResearchGate research on Swarm Commander. And anyway, so I'm thinking, and with further research, I'm thinking that the Swarm Commander works because it has these extra ingredients that are significant in terms of swarms locating in a certain location. I'm doing an experiment this year. I've gone out to my backyard and I've selected 3 different tree limbs, and I will mark them every 2 weeks or so with Swarm Commander just to see if I can attract a swarm to one of those branches, which would be accessible to me. and as well as running my normal amount of swarm traps here and throughout the neighborhood. Um, so it'll be fun just to mess around and experiment. But there again, uh, all the old timers who told me to switch from lemongrass to Swarm Commander, they all were nodding their heads and smiling and said, "Yeah, we told you so. We told you so." So there you go. There's science behind that. Those ingredients, again, are probably more than likely proprietary. But anyway, so that's what we covered at last night at our meeting. Again, it was a lot of fun. It was great to see everybody. We're having a it looks like we're going to have a great spring and a great build up, and I'll be looking forward to talking to you guys every week, giving you updates, and I promise to also record the swarms that we start to see and catch. And in fact, I'm going to add a couple of swarm, one swarm, one video that looks like a swarm, but it isn't a swarm. It's the normal activity that you see this time of year when you got a lot of newbies coming out to orient and defecate, as well as the old bees. And then I've been running a community feeder here for quite a few years, and I'll show you how that where that is and how that's working too. So again, remember to like and subscribe, share this video with your friends, and I do appreciate your participating. And I look forward to sharing with you next week some updates. Keep your fingers crossed. We might very well have our first swarm because it's going to be any day now. So I will talk to you later. Take care. Okay. These bees are not swarming. As you can see, there's a steady going in and coming out. Most of them are out here cleansing flights, or if you go inside, which we've been doing the last couple of days, you're going to see lots and lots and lots of brood. And as the brood emerges, the new bees, young bees, are nurse bees for a while, but then within a couple of weeks they're out here flying and orienting, because they will soon move up the ladder and become foragers. So hopefully in about the same time that we start getting more nectar. Of course, the nectar flow doesn't start for another month, the major flow. But anyway, that's what's going on. So just thought I'd share that with you.